Welcome to the Reality Revolution. I'm your host, Brian Scott. We have a couple very recent channelings on Quo that I found really interesting that cover a variety of topics, including an explanation of the Archangels, as well as the power of thought, how to support others metaphysically. Check out my previous episodes for a further explanation of who Quo is. Quo is a principle or a conglomeration of different high-density social memory complexes or advanced higher beings that speak about spiritual matters through a group called LL Research. We begin with a channeling on February 9th, 2022. Jim channeling begins by saying, "I am Quo and I am with this instrument at this time. We greet each of you in love and in light, and we thank you for inviting our presence this evening. We are honored to be joined with this group again. We feel that we are old friends that have been able to meet up on a regular basis for these many years. To renew our friendship is a joy. We would ask at this time if there might be a question which may begin to channel our particular response through this instrument." Gary asks, this question comes from Jay, who asks, "My understanding is that the four archangels, Raphael is associated with the gifts of air, Gabriel with water, Michael with fire, and Uriel with earth, and that Archangel Raphael is associated with a compass direction we know as east, Gabriel with west, Uriel with north, and Michael with south. Would you please share with us some teach learnings on how to work harmoniously with the archangels and their associated elements and or compass directions in order to be more of service to others and to help our beloved planet Earth ease more gracefully into fourth density?" Quo says, "I am Quo, and I am aware of your query, my brother. Before we begin, we may ask our perennial favor that you take our words and concepts as our opinions and not as final authorities. Leave behind those which do not read the truth to you at this time. This gives us the freedom to speak as we will. We do not wish to provide any blockages or roadblocks, shall we say, in any seeker's path. To speak to the point of the question, it is a large question in regards to how the various archangels may be utilized by the seeker of truth. For each seeker has a unique path to travel and may utilize each of the archangels in a certain fashion that may be unique to that seeker through remaining within certain boundaries or guidelines, shall we say. As you look upon the one known as Raphael, you look upon one which works with the concept of air, the gifts and powers of air, the air that is seen as being that active element which can inspire a seeker to move in a free form, shall we say, without the restrictions of gravity binding it to the earth. The air of the east, the direction of the rising sun, the direction in which life as you know it upon your planet Earth is seemingly or symbolically rising from the darkness of the night, the sleep, the forgetting. As Raphael empowers your journey of seeking at your request, then you may look upon the qualities of air in your life at being those which will take you upon a path that moves in response to the Creator within, seeking the Creator without in the world around one, so that there is an ambience of floating, freely being motivated by the concept of unity with all that you see and experience in your daily round of activities. As you move then to the Archangel Gabriel, that may be seen to be located in the realms of water, of fluid viscosity, of being imbued with the spirit that has gifts and powers of giving form to life. Life within your beingness which may be renewed, not only upon a daily basis, but moment by moment as you move through your daily round of activities, that you are able to utilize these gifts and powers of water in a manner which gives you more life, more ability to sustain, shall we say, the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune that is the third density illusion. This life, then, you may share with those you meet in your daily round of activities. The life of love, the consciousness of love that is formed in such a way in your daily experience that allows you to share the love and light of the one infinite Creator with all that you meet as you implore or invoke this quality of fluidity and being imbued with life from Gabriel. As you look to the south, and are aware of the Archangel Michael, with the sword pointed in the air as a symbol of fire, the fire of the one infinite creator that gives life to the universe around you. Those gifts and powers of fire are also more of what you would call intelligent, in that they are able to inspire higher and higher levels of apprehension of your own spiritual journey and the nature of the one creator that lives inside of you. Inside of each person you shall meet, inside of all of the creation through which you travel, all of the creation which has the life of the one creator, enlivening it, inspiring it, and making it available as the nature of your journey through the third density experience. This archangel is able to give you the inspiration that causes you to become your highest self, that portion of your being that exists within the sixth density of the balancing of love and wisdom. Moving now to the north and the Archangel Uriel, you see this being as that which is of the earth, that produces life upon your planet in rich abundance as it sows the seeds of intelligent energy within the ground around you, so that you are guided to become the type of being which is firmly rooted within the illusion of third density, in order that you may learn the lessons of polarization that give you the ability to make a choice in third density, the choice of how you shall spend the Creator's energies that flow through you, through your violet ray chakra, and move through all lower chakras and produce the manifestations of learning of mind, body, and spirit turned towards service to others or service to self. This choice is the fruit of the seeds of Uriel that you may call upon to help you in your choice of how to live your life, moment by moment, day by day, year by year, incarnation by incarnation, density by density, until at the final note, the final play upon the stage, you are one with the infinite creator. The channeling then moves to Gary. Gary's channeling says, "We are those known to you as the principle of Quo, and we have just enjoyed a small moment of attempted dialogue with this instrument, as it might be seen, as he issued his challenge and sought to be more clearly perceived within his energy sphere of our transmission. We counsel to this and to all instruments similarly, intending that inner quietude and the practice of listening may aid in the process of helping that which seems to be faint to appear more boldly or visibly within the mind. But whether or how this beam is perceived, we encourage the speaking during the intentional container of channeling, of speaking those thoughts which come to the mind and setting aside scrutiny until afterwards." Austin asks, "I have one myself." Ross said in 8010, "It is also to be noted that an adept is one which has freed itself more and more of the constraints of thoughts, opinions, and bonds of other selves. Whether this done for service to others or service to self, it is a necessary part of the awakening of the adept. This freedom is seen by those not free as what you would call evil or black. The magic is recognized, the nature is often not. I would like to explore this notion of the adept becoming freed from thoughts, opinions, and bonds of other selves further. One might read this and think that even a positive adept simply ignores social propriety, social norms, its obligations and bonds to other selves. But I personally suspect that for a positive adept, it is a much more nuanced and complicated situation than that. So can you please elaborate on what this means, particularly for a seeker on the positive path?" Quo says, "We are those of Quo, and thank you for this well-fashioned and well-articulated question. We welcome this inquiry and do indeed have thoughts that we may offer for you and all spiritual seekers' considerations. When exploring this topic of the necessary progression of freedom from the, as those of Ra spoke, thoughts, bonds, and opinions of other selves, and what implications this may have for that which you call empathy and other various honor duties that the self may feel in relationship to other self, or to societal self, or other groupings of selves, we give this instrument the concept of identity as our starting point into this rich subject. For it is our understanding that the freedom of which Ra spoke is not a disregard for the needs and the suffering of others or the environment about one, nor is it an indulgence in, we correct this instrument, nor is it what this instrument might call a permission slip to simply gratify and satisfy the self without concern for impact of one's action upon one's associates or environment. We would speak to this more, but first return to identity and zoom in on the relationship of this freedom and the identity of the seeker. For those within the third density experience, yet unawakened to the larger self, shall we say, the broader point of view which is merged more purely with the consciousness of the logos of love, have an identity that is this instrument wishes we did not ask that he speaks it, milieu of inputs from one's upbringing, from one's immersion in a world where the self is constantly receiving voices and messages and perspectives about who the self is or who the self should be, how the self fails to meet various standards of others and society, and how the self may go about meeting said standards of others and society. Those messages received vary across a wide range, but in probability likely are not in promotion of freedom of realization of the self as an infinite being, a being of infinite worth. They are likely not in promotion of discovery of the light within and the sharing of the light, but instead are likely messages which limit the scope of the identity based upon the limitations of perspective that others also ascribe to themselves and to the nature of life. Indeed, it is a ricocheting, cascading, disjointed song that each sings or stumbles through to one another. No third density being is exempt from this, including those who speak our words and receive them. There is not a self which is being held down by a world which seeks to hold it down, but there is a self which participates in this world, just as all other third density beings do, both receiving and, to the extent that the self is less than completely conscious, perpetuating these same limitations about who and what the self is and what it may do as a mind-body-spirit complex within your illusion. This freedom, then, is to release the self from the shackles of these limitations that are seemingly imposed, but more fundamentally internalized and taken to be part of the identity, to release these as old worn clothing that no longer fits the self in order not to be a rebel per se, or to condescendingly reject that which is given to the self, perhaps even in well-intentioned attempts to be of service, but to release them in gratitude for the use that the clothing in this metaphor offered to the seeker during a portion of its journey, giving the seeker protection or utility or sense of self within the container that the clothing offered, but which also served as a constraint in some way and in certain cases, an enslaved sense of the beholdenness to which was internalized. If one is, say, for instance, hinging identity upon the meeting of some standard or the approval of others, then one has disinvested themselves of their native power and projected it outward onto some source outside of the self, whether of an abstract nature or of another entity. So in this process of lovingly synthesizing the lessons that these imposing constraints offered and allowing them to fall away by contact with the Creator within the heart, by falling in love with the self-source not in the world, but in the Creator. The self then less this identity which had formerly had hooks, shall we say, with tethers to some, and we mean this not pejoratively, puppeteering strings elsewhere. And the self in this long progression, then instead of being reactive to the moment, particularly from the lower triad of energy centers, has a great range of determining how truly to be of service to this moment. For the positively oriented seeker, there is a desire to be of service, whatever that may look like according to the unique configurations of that seeker. There may be portions of solitude or distance from other mind-body-spirit complexes, but the nature of awakening to the Creator necessarily compels one to want to share its gifts, to find ways to help others, as you would see it, and free or freer at least of those limiting voices within. The self from a higher level can more finely tune to hear the genuine needs of the other self without being so ensnared in the psychodynamics of projection, persona, and pretense. With genuine empathy, the being freer of these limitations may see the other self before it with overwhelming compassion in its heart. This scenario we describe sounds very wonderful and beautiful, and a recipe which ought to make for happiness for the freed being and the recipient of its service. And indeed, this may often be the case. However, and to focus on our final point of reply before transferring this contact, there was that element introduced by Ra of the way in which other selves within your illusion may perceive this freedom, not as positive, but negative. There are various reasons for this. We scan this instrument's memory and find a movie known to you as Inception. In that story, the characters access, in an invasive way, which is not part of our sharing right now, the dreamscapes of other entities unaware. The characters of this movie then, in the dreams of other selves, are conscious and awake in an illusory world populated by many entities of the dreamer, who themselves are not conscious or awake. If those dreaming entities then become aware of the intruders, shall we say, then they may be inclined to turn to attack. While the entity who experiences this freedom, of which Ra described, is in no way an intruder upon the third density plane, they may be perceived somewhat similarly as other than, as not obeying the rules and dogmas that others in the society are constrained by. And instead of seeing such in one as a way shower or beacon, they may instead see one who is violating the rules, ranging anywhere from mild disrespect to offering threat to the identity of others. This theme, also explored in a very distorted way, is present in the dynamic between, we pull again from the Hollywood portion of this instrument's brain, Neo and others awakened from the Matrix, and those known as Agent Smiths. Again, we would caveat these two metaphors, low-hanging as they are in the mind of the instrument, to be taken with a considerable grain of salt, for they carry great distortion and great capacity for misapprehension, but do, in their limited way, shine some light into the dynamic which may be experienced by the entity who finds this freedom and who may then find themselves persecuted by those who are not. Such has been the case in your religious systems when the self discovers the creator within, which is perceived as a threat to the existing order. At this time, we would transfer our contact to the one known as Trisha. We are those of Quo, and we are now with this instrument. May we ask if there is a query at this time? Yes, Quo. I have one from Alfred who writes, "There's a channeling from Hatan done in 1957, and it reads, 'My friends, you have no idea of your own thought power. This thought power, when concentrated by the multitudes, by the masses, can bring about anything. There's much power in thought, my brothers, much power.'" Alfred goes on, "May you expand as much as you can on this power of thought and suggest effective ways as to utilize it for our mind-body-spirit evolution in the positive polarity. Just how much weight does it have in all our seeking journeys?" Quo says, "We are aware of the query, and we thank you. We are those of Quo, and we appreciate the reminder of the words of our fellow brother and family, Hatan, for this piece of knowing is quite potent, both in this entity's density and throughout creation. Indeed, thought can be extremely powerful. The simple dynamics and mechanics, as they may seem to you, can, in actuality, as you may say, move mountains. For you see, thoughts are the very fuel to the vehicle known as action or creation. Take, for example, at the very large yet central scale, that it was thought that created all of this illusion, all of this dance in which each entity partakes. It was thought that the Creator wanted to know itself, that vehicle which provided the genesis to each fragment of the tapestry you call experience. Now we realize that comparing one's individual thoughts to the thought that created all that there is may seem difficult or impossible. However, we would remind the seeker that we are but extensions of that Creator, and thereby our thoughts can be as powerful. To highlight this, we would like to illustrate the relationship between thought and action or creation. Thought is the starting line, if you will. It is where one comes to the drawing board and begins to map out action and creation. It may not seem as though that is the case. However, thought is like the pen to the architect, or the paintbrush to the painter, or the tools to the carpenter. You are beginning to create some type of framework or dialogue within the self, within one's consciousness, in an attempt to relate to the illusion around self. This exercise of attempting to understand the dynamics at play within and without the self is an important first step for this eventual process to action creation. Once sense is made, for lack of better phrasing, of the situation or environment, then the entity can begin to assign value to that input. Assigning labels such as good or bad, necessary or unnecessary, desired or repelled. We use these words, these terms, these values, for they are the values which entities in your illusion tend to employ for describing that which surrounds you. However, we must caveat that, in our belief, there are no situations or beings or extensions of the Creator in any form that are valued less or have no value than when compared to other aspects. Continuing with our discussion, once these labels have been affixed, the entity can then set intention. Sometimes this intention comes naturally, like the teacher who creates a lesson plan, or a doctor who creates a treatment plan, or even the entity simply stating that they would like to do over the course of the day. In this way, intention is the bridge between thought and action creation. It is the invoking of the energy, the consciousness, the desire to create or act, and it is a potent activator or motivator for the entity. For you see, sometimes the setting of intention ring like calls to your brothers and sisters afar. We hear your intentions, and perhaps the entity's higher selves hear their intentions, and assistance may befall the entity or yourself upon making and starting said intentions. And while sometimes assistance from beyond is gifted or given to the entity, oftentimes there is no need for such assistance, for the entity is inherently motivated and activated and inspired to create and to act. So you see that this process, as we show through this instrument in a 3-step type of equation, is at the very basis for much of what you experience in this illusion. What action from any entity is not without thought and intention behind it. Every action, every creation has intention propelled by thought. Now, dear seeker, there was a desire to know how to use thought in most powerful ways to help the self and fellow entities and the planet as a whole to transition, to move towards a more positive polarity, a more evolved dimension. And we suggest the faith and the trust in the self and the power of self through thought. Perhaps this instrument is having difficulty wording that phrase. We shall try again. The first step in utilizing thought towards the goal which you seek is to have faith and trust in the very power that thought can create and can hold. That kind of faith and trust comes from and can be practiced by reminding the self of his or her or their creatorship, how they too are the creator. They too are magical, divine, and inherently creative. From there, we suggest that one practices the thought experiment of being gentle to self, another self, when thought comes through the entity. We suggest that the entity observe the thought with a gentle touch, see the thought and accept the thought. Upon analyzing the thought, the entity can move into various directions of continued thinking. Perhaps the thought was one that made the entity feel insecure or afraid or angry. Then there are avenues for continuing along those trajectories of insecurity, fear, and anger. In instances such as that, we suggest that the entity genuinely and lovingly experience those sensations of insecurity, fear, anger, sadness, and envy. All these emotions that you in your density have termed as negative or unfavorable, and work to accept and love those emotions, feeling them fully, knowing them fully, for the experience has gifted you this opportunity. And this may take some time, and you may take practice, and the entity may fail to do that which we suggest. But once the entity is able to accept the emotion fully, embrace the situation, the entity can then work to set the intention to love that emotion, set the intention to send love to that thought, and from there the intention can be to allow the loving energy one has sent to that emotion, into that thought, out into the world, out into the illusion. By that we mean that the entity expresses themselves authentically, radiates who they truly are inwardly and outwardly, and always with the signature of love behind it. And it is through that radiation, that expression of love and authenticity, whatever that authenticity may look like, the most potent transitions or changes can occur. Creation and action can bloom from such radiation. Though it may not seem to be likely outcome, or it may seem impossible, we would remind the seeker that simple radiation and expression of love and light is a beautiful, powerful means of lightening the vibration on this planet. Think of who has inspired you throughout your life with simple gestures of love, be it a smile in an unexpected circumstance, or the observation of someone fully being themselves and the freedom you sense from that expression. That inspiration is extremely powerful for you. See that while the changes seem large at this time, you must understand that we see how the current events may feel. We understand how they may feel, but it is those actions of small gifts of love or kindness or compassion that act as seeds to greater, more positive evolution and growth, not just of the self, but of the planet as a whole. So we ask, dear seeker, that you accept and employ your thoughts with loving arms and an open heart. Use them through intention to create and act in loving ways and plant those seeds. In the continuing practice of this cycle, you water those seeds and plant more seeds, and as time goes on, though you may not sense it or even see it, those seeds begin to sprout roots. And as you continue living in an incarnation wherein you fully accept and love, you begin to see the most gorgeous and vibrant flowers that spring forth from those seeds you planted. We appreciate this question, and we hope and know that those who seek are aware and accepting of their power and their potential for serving others and the planet as a whole. Question? Eskimo, as you might expect, I have a particular fondness for the previous instrument. Well, I like everybody in the room, but the instrument holds a special place in my heart, and I was wanting to support her during her channeling, and it got me thinking about the business of sending love and light to someone. So I want to ask about what we can do and how we can do it. To the first half of that question, what can we do for others energetically on an energetic level? Can we send them light for protection? Can we send them love so that they have the opportunity to feel loved? Can we send them inspiration and so forth? What can we do exactly with sending love and light? And then to the how question, how do we do that? Do we visualize them surrounded by white light? Do we open our heart and feel love? Do we undergo any particular procedure? Any information you can give on this topic would be appreciated. Quo says, we are Quo and are aware of the query, my brother. We appreciate the conscientiousness and orientation towards care and service with which it is asked. We find that such questions involving the care of not just those within one's circle of seeking, but any that one wishes to offer care for, is central and an important aspect of seeking together as a group. And the opportunity to speak to this query is one that we are eager to grasp. We may first start with what might seem as an obvious notion, in that the basis of this question relies on the practical maintenance of such relationships. While the question implies what one may do in terms of offering light and energy to an individual through thought or visualization, it must not be ignored that such inward and, shall we say, silent abilities to offer magical support are predicated upon the harmony of the relationship itself. We will not belabor this fundamental aspect, for we understand that this circle of seeking grasps this essential aspect of group work rather well, but it cannot go unmentioned that it is primal and should be tended to first before attempting to bolster care for an individual by these other means. To speak more to the heart of your query as to what one may offer for another by such means of inward thought, this idea has many indeed, infinite possibilities and probabilities that are dependent upon the orientation of the seeker, and a primal aspect of this orientation being the spiritual foundation of that seeker. By this, we intend to mean that the belief structures held by a seeker involved in the seeking and used by the instrument or the entity on its path imply what may be offered. For if one does not have a root or core belief of what is possible and believe this with all their heart, then the potential is limited to what may be offered. As such, we encourage any seeker wishing to increase their ability and the scope of what they can offer to other entities by such means to contemplate deeply, meaningfully, and regularly upon what they believe to be possible. What structures of seeking, of philosophy, of metaphysical understanding has the seeker built its understanding upon? and examine this structure with care. The rigidity of the structure can offer stability. It may also be limiting, and so a regular audit or examination of the beliefs and ideals that have allowed a seeker to reach a certain point within their seeking may reveal certain ideas that can be let go or released, and as such increase what may be offered to another entity. The scope of this includes all of those examples that you have mentioned. In addressing the how this may be offered, we must touch on the most key aspect of this magical offering, and that is that the entity offering it and the entity receiving must share on some level an understanding and a relationship that an offering may be received openly. It is best that this understanding includes the notion that when such is offered, both entities are operating as pathways to the one creator, so that the entity offering whatever it wishes to offer is not giving of its own finite self, but is instead attempting to channel the light of the creator in whatever manifestation that entity perceives this light to the receiving entity. And it is beneficial for the receiving entity to understand that while the entity offering such support is doing so as a service, that which it offers is much greater than the entity that is offering. In speaking to these specific technical details of how such support may be offered, we encourage each seeker to look again to the foundational principles of one seeking for certain aspects of concepts that can form a solid foundation for specific offerings. We use as an example the concepts understood by this circle of seeking and offered by us, the Confederation, in service to the one infinite creator of the energy centers. While these concepts of energy centers have been discovered and studied by many upon your planet in many different ways, the specific idea of how these energy centers operate have been well established within this circle of seeking. The way that these energy centers present themselves to the inner vision, the cognitive and emotional and spiritual aspects involved in each energy center are understood in a generally shared way, and this understanding has been reinforced through repeated study. Thus, such a well-worn concept may serve as a very effective means through which one entity may offer support for another entity. If the entity offering its support has a strong connection to this specific notion of energy centers, then the visualization of these energy centers, the intention of bolstering one's own energy centers and another's energy centers through visualizing light moving through such by enveloping and offering the intention to clear and crystallize energy centers at any given moment. These notions become much more powerful because of the established understanding. This example is specific to this circle, but we find that there are many entities both within the circle and who may read our words, who are well studied in other types of metaphysical principles that can serve a similarly powerful basis through which such offering can be given. We encourage this circle of seeking specifically as they continue this service to discuss what may be offered and what may be received, how it may be visualized, and to experiment, shall we say, with the most effective means and the most effective shared concepts for offering such support. This is also true for any entity wishing to offer support for any other entity, that having a shared and open conversation about what they desire to accomplish and how it might be accomplished will open the channels that make such support available. We find it most appropriate to leave our own specific suggestions at this broad suggestion, and we encourage the circle to explore this area further, and if it wishes, after such exploration, to question further upon this topic. At this time, we would leave this instrument and transfer the contact to the one known as Jim in order to share our parting thoughts for this circle. Jim channeling says, "I am Quo, and I am once again with this instrument. We find that there has been a great deal of energy expended this evening by each instrument, and we thank each for being willing to accept the responsibility for transmitting these concepts, which have been, in a great degree, very expansive and intricate, shall we say. This has been an evening in which instruments have been given a great effort, and we thank you for your conscientiousness and your willingness to serve. We are those who have our own journey of seeking to make, and as we blend our journeys with yours, we are most humbled and gratified to feel your own dedication to serving the one infinite Creator in all things by each word that you speak and each thought that you share. We are all one in this effort of becoming the creator. At this time, we shall take our leave of this instrument and this group, leaving you in joy, leaving you in love, leaving you in light. We are known to you as those of Quo, Adonai, Vasu, Boragas. I really enjoyed this channeling, and it is wonderful to read these words. It's ironic as well. I was just reading Damien Eccles' book, Angels and Archangels, and he was going over the different angels, what they looked like, what direction they came from. And so I found it interesting that this was a recent channeling and they talked about that. As far as I understand, and everybody has a different relationship, the angels are like computer programs. It's not the best to personify them. They're energies that you're accessing. And so it's powerful. We're powerfully accessing specific sorts of energies. They're all still a part of the one creator, but they work in a unique and powerful way. And so each of them have their own roles, and it's important to understand where they come from. They're related to the seasons. They're related to the elements. You can even go further with them, and they have ways that they look. They have colors that are associated with them. They have planets that are associated with them. There's parts of the Kabbalah they're associated with. And the visualization of these archangels and the declaration and intoning of these names can have power in your life. And it's interesting to hear Quo talk about it as a legitimate thing. I do find it interesting, the discussion of the adept letting go of other selves, meaning they are not influenced by the outside world anymore. They still care and love for everybody and want to be of service, but at the same time, they are free within. They identify themselves with the real creator, not with the voices of other selves, where you sort of let go of the ego and you're not worried what other people think and say. I don't think I'm there yet. I hope so. I have days when I'm there. I think we all struggle with that. But when we have those days when we don't really care what anybody else thinks or says, that's true freedom. We don't let other people define our own identity. And the last question is something I really wanted them to ask for a long time. I think about it a lot. When people say, I'm going to send you love and light, what does that mean? And there is a specific process I go through in sending love and light. I open my heart. I see the light of the Creator coming through me, and I send it out, and I visualize sending it out. And I found what they said to enhance my understanding of this. The idea is that it's not my light I'm sending. I'm channeling the light of the one Creator and sending it to others. And for it to really have an effect, the other sort of has to be open to receiving this light. A lot of times we send love and light to people and they're simply not open to receiving it. But there is a process. I know that there are other channels and people that make fun of the idea, oh, I'm sending you love and light. And they think it's so funny when people say that. But it's a real scientific, actual thing when you send love and light. It's not just a phrase. It's not just a cliche. And so I want you to share how you send love and light. When you say, I'm sending you love and light, do you pause for a moment? Do you visualize it? Do you send it? Do you have a feeling? Do you invoke words? What is your process in sending love and light? I am sending love and light to everybody that's listening to this podcast right now. I'm seeing it bathe you and bless you and heal you, invoking wisdom and love within you. I see it awakening your realization of the Creator within you. And as you feel this light that I'm sending you, you become the Creator within this density, looking out into the third density as the Creator. This light is awakening that portion of you. It's removing the veil. And you can feel this love. You can feel its essence and power as I send it to you. And anybody that listens to this, know that I'm sending you love and light, because the more love and light that I send, the more comes through me. Think of it like water. If I'm going to send water, I have to send the water through the hose, and the more water goes through the hose, right? So the more light I send, the more light goes through me. The more light that you want in your life, send out more light. And the more people that you send out light to, the more light that is going through you. And for us to bring more light into this world, we have to send more light out to others. You can find all episodes of The Reality Revolution at therealityrevolution.com. And welcome to The Reality Revolution.